investing in fast-growing technology companies since 2001, both as a VC as well as an angel. Right now, I sit on the board of a couple of startups, including Indoors, which is a indoor location-based company in Vienna, and Sumerian Partners, which is an impact advisory firm in London. Primarily, I'm working on my own startup right now. So more next time, hopefully. Challenges to growth and why startups fail is really how I've kind of titled this talk. And let me just see. Yeah, so there's I think all of you know there's plenty of obstacles as to why startups fail or why it's difficult to grow. I really want to focus on 4 things today: people, processes, money, and luck, because these are the 4 things I kind of typically hear the most from entrepreneurs and other investors. So I thought let's dive into it in a little bit more detail, and let me give you some perspective as to what are the kinds of things I've seen go wrong, or what can be done to try to address some of these. Some of you in the audience are old enough to remember the Depeche Mode song from 1984, "People Are People." And I'm going to start with people because that's the one you're going to hear the most, I think. Even Christian in his presentation earlier, if he's still here, was talking a lot about people. And that's really the thing. It should be easy, as the song says, but that's, I think, where most startups fail and where most of the challenges come from. The thing that I see a lot is the single founder problem. And as depicted over there, you know, it's a guy kind of in the desert on his own, trying to build a company. Startup and entrepreneurship is a very, very lonely process. And if you do it or attempt to do it by yourself, I think you're going to find it very, very difficult. There are, of course, exceptions, Zuckerberg being the obvious example. But in most cases, I've found that single founder teams really, really struggle. And part of it is, as I said, it's a very lonely process, so it's easy to kind of give up. But also, you need to sell people, right, from day one about your proposition, what you're trying to do, your idea. So it's a very, very good exercise that I think, again, Christian was talking about earlier, to go out, to brainstorm, to talk about your ideas, and learn and adapt from those. So if you don't have those conversations early, if you can't convince people early that you're really working on something that can change the world, then you're probably barking up the wrong tree. So again, big word of advice: single founder, difficult, not impossible. But I would encourage people and teams, if you are in this room kind of thinking about doing something, to very early start building a team of good people around you. Along the same lines, is this moving? Yeah, along the same lines, I've seen lots and lots of teams that don't have any technical founders. And again, I'm talking here mostly about technology companies because that's what I know and that's what I've been doing. So forgive me if you're building a restaurant, but I think the same would apply. You know, you need someone who understands the domain of what you're trying to do, and not that people in suits are bad, and there's nothing wrong with that, but if you are going to start a technology company and you don't have anybody in your team who's technical, I think you're going to start running into trouble quite quickly. There's many opportunities and many platforms in this day and age to be able to build, for example, an MVP very quickly with an outsourced team and to get initial traction. But I think once you start scaling, and this session is mostly about growth, you're going to find that without kind of some sort of in-house technical understanding, with a CTO or a co-technical founder, you're really going to start hitting your limitations very, very quickly. And I've seen this often enough over the last 15 odd years that it's something I definitely wanted to highlight today. The other big kind of issue that you do see a lot is fights between founders, and this is a very, very common occurrence. I mentioned Facebook and Zuckerberg earlier. You could argue that that was a fight as well between the Winklevoss brothers and Mark. But this is the main reason I think that most startups end failing is that there is some sort of disagreement, there's some sort of fight between the founders, they split, and eventually they kind of fizzle out on their own. The other, when we talk about people, there's obviously kind of growing the team and you know, that hiring, firing kind of situation, which I think a lot of people struggle with. I mentioned it in a couple of slides, but I'll say it now. I think the story is really around, you know, hire slowly, fire fast, right? So it's, if you find that something's not working out with someone or with your co-founder, make changes quickly, because life's too short and you can kind of make cause too much damage to your business if you don't address the people issue, the hiring issue very early on in the process. The other thing that I think is underemphasized or under-discussed, shall we say, is the scaling too quickly. So many startups, you know, go through the process, they raise the money, and then they go on a hiring rampage. They just like start hiring lots of people because they think they've got the money, they need to spend it, and they should start scaling and growing. And just like the baby in the photo, often they're not ready for that. And they end up hiring too many people, and they don't end up making the changes, they burn through their money, and before you know it, it's all over and done. So I think when we talk about people, you know, these are the 5 topics I wanted to kind of address. So, you know, solo founder, no technical founders, fighting between founders, not hiring right, and over-hiring. And that's a lot of challenges that you have to face and deal with from a very, very early stage. So what are some of the things you can do? I think that's more important in many ways rather than pointing out just problems. One thing I think people don't do enough of is psychometric testing, right? We think we're all pretty good at judging other people and characters, but it's quite hard to be objective on this thing. So there's a lot of tools and processes that you can use out there to basically help you understand each other. What motivates you, what drives you, you know, and how you can communicate with each other without kind of leading to the fights that we talked about earlier, or the mishiring. So I really encourage people to do a lot more of this type of psychometric type testing, not as a tool to make a hire or fire decision, but actually as a tool to help you work better together. Some of the other things, and I don't want to kind of spend too much time on it, because you can read it all for yourself. But you know, I mentioned the hire slow, fire fast, and maybe it should say hire fast, fire faster, because as a startup you do need to move quickly, but you do need to kind of identify very soon if things are not working, so that you can make changes very quickly and move on. Next topic I wanted to touch on was processes, because this is an area that you as entrepreneurs can probably control the most, because it's your business, it's your process, and you can define, identify how to make it work the best. The people question is obviously more challenging than processes. If you haven't read, as an entrepreneur, as a startup entrepreneur, if you haven't read Dave McClure's slides on metrics, you should go away right now and go read it. Because this is probably the most important thing to help you succeed from a process point of view in your startup. And I'm not going to go through it in great detail, but what tends to happen with most entrepreneurs is they focus on some very high-level metrics, like revenue and traffic, without drilling down into the customer life cycle and the customer experience to really understand what's happening in the guts of their business. So they think that things are going pretty well, but they don't realize and can't anticipate when things start going off-piste, shall we say. And Dave does a very, very good job, and I kind of give him the full credit. And like I said, everyone should read this presentation or go through it or watch one of the videos of him presenting it on YouTube. Because as an entrepreneur, you really, really need to understand these metrics. And it's not just the tech entrepreneur. I'm not just talking about app companies. This applies to restaurants, hotels, you know, car dealerships, you name it. This is really understanding customer life cycle, which I think is absolutely fundamental. And unfortunately, too many people get it wrong. The other one is on the financials, right? I mean, we can sit here and go through these one by one, but in the interest of time, again, do you really know the difference between all these things as a founder, as an entrepreneur? Bookings versus revenue is the classic one, which everyone trips over. Gross margin versus contribution margin. You should know all these things because that's actually going to help you scale and grow your company if you really understand what's happening, shall we say, under the hood. And again, I meet too many founders, too many entrepreneurs who don't, and then they run into trouble. Cash flow, again, versus revenue. A classic one where I've seen companies grow very, very quickly, very nicely, but are bleeding cash and don't understand why. The other key process that I think Christian also talked about earlier was listening to your customer and specifically saying no to customers. I think is one thing we all as entrepreneurs suffer from because we're obsessed with gaining customers and gaining revenue, but we don't realize that often that's a detraction, takes us in the wrong direction. You know, saying no to customers about features or even saying no to them as joining you as customers is something that, you know, most entrepreneurs don't think about and don't build into their processes, which I think can come later, you know, to bite them. So the key thing is, you know, testing, listen, observe, ask. Your customers are absolutely the key to your business, and if you're not listening to them, I think you're going to find that you're going to run into trouble fairly quickly. The other key process that you know, we're going to, I guess, focus on this afternoon next door is pitching. And I come often to these events and a lot of people come up on stage and say, we're not fundraising. And that's very sad, actually. You should always be fundraising. You should always be pitching because you just don't know who's in the audience. You don't know who can actually end up changing your business and helping you succeed in an order of magnitude that you could have probably never anticipated. So I always say to people, whether you're sitting on an airplane or pitching or presenting to an audience, have your pitch ready. Always be open to who is there and what the kinds of questions they're going to ask you, because you just never know what's going to come out of it. You know, have the three key basic things in your back pocket at all time. Your elevator pitch, which is, you know, 30 seconds. Your demo, which should be, you know, 5 minutes at most. And your 10 to 12 page slide deck. This should be always up to date, always on your iPad, always accessible so that you can share it and discuss your business. You know, Christian mentioned earlier kind of sharing and mentoring, and this is really key because it'll help you understand what's your purpose and what's you're really trying to achieve with your startup. The other key process obviously is the plans. Financial is the obvious one, but you know, how many companies do you know have a proper hiring plan? How many companies do you know have a proper you know, technical roadmap plan? Not many, actually. Most entrepreneurs and startups just tend to wing it, and this is where you can kind of really really a key process that you can control that'll help you grow and scale. Remember, we're talking about growth and scaling here, right? So you know, these are the things that you need to constantly be tweaking, iterating, again, updating so that you can really scale and grow your business effectively and internationalize, as I was supposed to originally talk about, your business at the right time. So you know, practical advice, what can you do? What can you take away from here? It's the obvious ones, right? So know your pitch, know your plan, know your processes, know your metrics. You know, I should be able to come up to you, and if you're pitching your idea, and I say to you, "What's your conversion rate for, you know, for your marketing?" You should be able to tell me straight away. That should be stuff you should be sleeping, breathing, eating every day, every week, every month, so that you can really grow your business at the right time. Because overscaling and early scaling is a big, big problem that a lot of companies fail because of. Oh, what did I do? Sorry, it looks like we've... are we going backwards? Technical guys? That's... What's going on? That's not... We're going to talk about money. What happened to the money section? Most important section. Okay. All right. Sorry. I can sing a song in the meantime. Try again. There's some slides missing here. It's okay. Let's just wrap up. I mean, let me continue. So the next area I was going to talk about money, and I think there was 3-4 areas that I wanted to focus on. One was, not having enough money, which is I think or not having enough money, which is I think a problem that most of us understand and have faced before in our past. There's the challenge of raising too much money. The example I was going to use was Boo.com, which raised 80 million pounds and I think burned through that in 6 months because again they had overscaled the business. And so what can you do when it comes to money? Well, I think my key message here is you can always be more lean, right? I mean, I think look at your businesses, try to strip out costs and be as lean as possible for as long as possible so that your money lasts you longer and you don't need to be fundraising as often as you might need to otherwise. The other thing is, the funding models have changed dramatically from what they were maybe 10, 15 years ago. It's no longer about VCs, friends and families, angels. There's plenty of alternate methods now that you can use, from P2P to crowd to invoice financing very efficiently. Using your customers to finance your business is probably the most underutilized mechanism. Part of the reason I heard recently was that people struggle to ask their clients to pay them. So if an invoice is overdue, a lot of people really struggle emotionally to send an email to their clients or send the invoice again to say, hey, you're 60 days overdue, you need to pay me. So there's a lot of companies that are focusing on that little aspect because they realize that people didn't want to send that message to their customers. But customers are a very, very important source of cash that is very underutilized by startups and companies. The last section I wanted to talk about, so we're back to the slides, I guess, is luck. A lot of people say, well, you do have to be lucky, or do you need a portion of luck to succeed? Who knows this company? I think a lot of you probably recognize the logo, but this is one of Europe's new unicorns. This is Shazam. Probably many of you don't know, and it's too small probably to read in the back, but this company was founded actually in 2000, in May 2000, and it just became a unicorn now, 15 years later. So this was a really long, hard journey that this company went through. I think it was 11 funding rounds to date. And the growth curve of this company, again, I think it might be too small for you in the back, but the growth company of this company was pretty much flat until about 2008. It suddenly took off in 2008. So it was founded in 2000, and it took off in 2008, 8 years later. And this wasn't because it was a difficult technology to solve that took them 8 years. It's because they got lucky. And basically what happened is this thing. So the iPhone came along, and Shazam was one of the first apps on the iPhone store. And it suddenly was the platform that enabled them to do what they were trying to do. For those of you old enough to remember, Shazam initially was, hold up your phone to the speaker and send a text message to a number. I think it was 5180 or something like that. And they would text you back the name of the song. So it was extremely cumbersome and very high friction, and nobody really used it. But as soon as the app came along, which was a button, nobody wanted to remember the SMS number, but now you could just press a button and hold up your phone, and the same information was sent back to you, it suddenly absolutely took off. So, for these guys, luck was very important in their success, and so I don't discount luck. I do say it's important sometimes, especially if you have platforms that emerge that can help you enable the success of your business. So, the moral of the story from people like Shazam is, find very supportive investors so that they're willing to stick with you for 15 years before you can actually finally deliver success. But B is to be willing to innovate and to experiment. I think Christian again was talking about experimenting earlier. Here was this new platform that nobody really knew whether it was going to succeed or not, called the iPhone. They were one of the first to build an app and get on this store. And it worked out for them, and they persevered, right? They kind of hung in there. They believed that their idea was good and their concept was good, and eventually they got there. So luck is important sometimes, but you can do things. As I say, you can work harder, but you can do things to put yourself in the position such that you can leverage that luck. So in the interest of lunch, I think that's since it's 12 o'clock, that's pretty much it from me. I'm happy to answer some questions if anybody has any at this time, or leave you to your lunch.
Do we have questions? We have.
So I run an angel investment group out of London, central London. The thing I very often hear is a real hesitancy to invest in startups at the non-revenue or pre-revenue stage. From your experience, do you think that hesitation of investing in companies pre-revenue is a mistake and a bit silly, or would you actually want to see some movement? You personally, as an investor, would like to see some movement, some activity, some revenue, some track record, etc., etc. Because I get a feeling at the moment that it's almost motherhood and apple pie now not to support organizations pre-revenue.
Yeah, I personally do invest pre-revenue, but again, I think then in that situation, you're right. People do want to see some sort of track record in the individuals that are involved. So I'm happy to back individuals who have had some sort of success in the past. I think if they're first-time entrepreneurs, I would hesitate, and I think it's right to maybe hesitate a little bit, because there are lots of opportunities to invest out there which have more traction. But I think there are other roles that there are other investors and other mechanisms in place today that provide funding for those types of individuals who maybe don't have a track record. So I would rather see those types of startups go through some sort of accelerator or incubation program where they are given much more hand-holding to get them through those early stages. But if an individual does have a track record, I think it's okay, and I'm willing to back them, even if they don't have revenue or any metrics. If it's literally, even in 2000, I invested in a. Sorry to digress, but I invested in a semiconductor startup, and literally when they showed up, it was two guys, a pitch deck, and a dog, and it was an 8 million round in the end. But they had a track record. They had done it once before, and they did succeed again. But that's the thing you can then kind of leverage on, the fact that they've done it before. Anybody else? Lunch is served.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chatwani.
Sorry about the slides.